Welcome to another video, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be looking at an interview done with Jordan Peterson. And the phrase that was used was the divine sovereign individual. Right? Now I'm only going to play the last 10 minutes or so. As you can see, it's at 52:30. It only runs for 102:52. Right? So the last 10 minutes or so I think is very pivotal and applies to so many different sets of individuals. I think it's important for me to play it, and also while I play it, add some context to it about the key areas that he's touching on and who it applies to specifically. So subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it with everyone you know, and let's begin.
So the question here is the loss of freedom of speech, the corruption of the universities, the rise of China, which is in all kinds of ways a more formidable opponent than the Soviet Union was. In all kinds of ways, one could argue that we're in a worse position now than we were in the 70s. And so what I want to know is...
I just said that in my last video when I was talking about the TikTok crowd. And TikTok, as far as I'm concerned, that is where logic and reason go to die. But I just made this exact same point, and now I'm coming upon this interview. That's what you call synchronicity.
Are you speaking to those few who have eyes to see and ears to hear? Do you believe that we are capable? Do you hope to prompt another kind of restoration? Or is Jordan Peterson the fascinating, eloquent, compelling champion of a lost cause?
Well, I mean, when I spent a lot of time at the various universities I was associated with studying motivation for atrocity, because I was very curious about that as a psychologist, not as a sociologist or an economist or a political scientist. You're an Auschwitz guard. Okay, what's motivating you as an individual? And I wanted to understand it well enough so that I could understand how I could do that, because one answer to that is, well, that sort of behavior is so far beyond the pale that it's completely incomprehensible. It's just a manifestation of, say, like intense psychopathy, and a normal person can't even imagine it. And I think, that evidence doesn't really suggest that, because it isn't obvious that all the people involved in the Nazi movement, for example, were criminally pathological, that they were deviations, like incomprehensible deviations from the norm. It'd be lovely to think that, and it would make the world a lot simpler, but I think the evidence mostly suggests that no, you can get ordinary people to do that sort of thing, and maybe even to enjoy it. And so that's pretty bloody terrifying. And so I tried to understand that, and I think I did to some degree, although we can't go into that. A fair bit of that's a consequence of envy. It's the spirit of Cain, I would say, if you had to sum it up in a phrase. But
isn't it interesting that he just said the spirit of Cain? Who was Cain? Cain was effectively the first murderer. I mean, take it for what it is.
That isn't the issue. The issue is, how do you stop it from happening again? And because that's supposed to be what we're concentrating on, let's say, in the aftermath of the Second World War. Never forget, which should mean something like, how about we don't do this again? And so my question was, well, how do we best go about that, ensuring we don't walk down that road again? And my conclusion was, because it was fundamentally an issue of individual psychology, most fundamentally, more than economics, more than sociology, all of that. The cure is individual. People have to act as ethically as they are powerful, or else. And so I've been trying to convince people to do that, I suppose, or to put forward, not to convince them precisely, but to put forward an argument about why that's necessary and why it's on them. It's like, no, this is on you. You got to understand this problem. It's you. You don't get it right, it isn't going to work. And so how do you do that? Well, you start with what you have under control in your own life, because where else are you going to start? You look to yourself. Put your house in order. Don't be worried about some other person walking this satanic path. And that's what activists do all the time, right? It's you. It's the corporations, like it's someone else. No. It's you.
And here is my problem with the left, or the left versus right paradigm, right? Because the victimology is always like, oh, me, me, me. They're not trying to do anything to better their position, but constantly they're a victim, right? Which is what I hate about TikTok, right? Somebody gets misgendered, they're on TikTok having a meltdown for the simplest things. And I'm like, aren't there bigger issues in life that need to be addressed? You know, guy goes into GameStop, somebody addresses him as sir. He has a total conniption. He says, oh yeah, I would do it again. Like, have you no shame? You're out of order. And people really want to applaud this, like, oh yeah, this is something. No, your gender identity should not mean anything to anybody else but you. And of course, the people who are part of that group. As far as other people outside of that group participating, it's a non-starter. This is why the conversation always breaks down, because you want too much from other people, but you're not comfortable with who you are. If you were, we would be fine. But you're not. So we're not.
And I think that's also fundamental to the Judeo-Christian doctrine, is that it's you. It's on you. Redemption's an individual matter. And so my hope is that if enough people take themselves with enough seriousness, then we won't end up in hell. Because we certainly could. It's a high probability. And so, and I also don't think that you can be motivated enough to put your house in order to the degree that's necessary merely by being attracted, let's say, to the potential utopia that might emerge as a consequence of that. So that'd be a vision of heaven, let's say. No, you need to also be terrified of hell. Think, well, there's no such thing. It's like, just because you haven't been there doesn't mean there's no such thing. It's like, you have to be pretty bloody naive to think there's no such thing. Like, how much evidence do you need?
What do you think the Africans who were slaughtered by King Leopold, their definition of hell was? King Leopold II. What do you think about all the people who died under Mao, under Stalin, under Hitler, under any conqueror that came forth to conquer and left a wash of bloodshed in their wake? But then people are so quick to say, oh, you know, God is a loving God. Like, we treat each other like shit. Slaughtered by the thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. But you think a creator is supposed to have mercy on you. Yeah. Totally makes sense. Totally.
And how does it come about? Well, it comes about, at least in partial, consequence of the sins of men. And I think that's true. So I go around and I talk to people. I say, look, there's not only more to you than you know, there's more to you than you can imagine. You have an ethical responsibility to act in that light. And you might claim not to believe that, but I would say, well, your whole culture is predicated on that belief, and insofar as you are an active member of that culture and a believer in its structure, then you believe it. You might not be very good at believing it, you might be full of conflict and doubt, and you might not be able to articulate it, but it's still right at the bedrock of your culture, this notion of what? The divine sovereign individual. Is that not what your culture is predicated on, that idea? The logos inherent in each person? It's something other than that? I've never seen a credible argument made to show that it's anything other than that. You can say, well, rights are attributed to you by the state. It's like, sorry, that's a weak argument because the state's dependent on your actions. So, to believe that, you have to believe that the state is the entity.
This is my problem with those on the right. I'm not even going to call them conservative. They're far right? These are the bootlicks of society. The comply or die types, right? How is it you could see a guy get dragged out of his vehicle, beat to death, and then say, well, if you just complied, he wouldn't have died. Like, in this city, I don't know how it is in every city. I assume it's pretty much the same. It's probably standard. If you go a certain amount of miles per hour over the speed limit, is considered reckless driving. So, like, let's say on the expressway, it's 70, right? But you get caught doing like 95. I think that's instantly reckless driving, right? Much less if you got caught doing triple digits and they actually caught up with you. That's reckless driving. So let's say you got caught with that, right? When the state trooper, it's usually a state trooper, when they roll up to your whip, do you expect them to say, sir, do you know how fast you were going? Give me your license and registration. Or do you expect them to come to your car, grab you out, beat the shit out of you right there, and then don't even ask for your license and registration? Now, if you think the first part is what I've experienced, right? Even when you're speeding, you know how fast you're going? Instantly you'd be like, no, not really. License and registration. Right? You don't expect to get dragged out of the car and beaten. I mean, I've been pulled over before. But you're saying, come on. These 5 guys, obviously, they shouldn't have been cops. No way, no how. And I hear people on the right, here on YouTube, saying, well, you should have complied. Like, what is wrong with you people?
And that individuals are just subordinate in some fundamental sense to the state. It's like, no. The state is dependent on the individual to exactly the same degree. So we're the active agent.
Without us, there is no state. In other words, we are active participants in the state. Just in case you're too thick to get it.
Agent of the state, in some sense. We're the seeing eye of the state, the speaking mouth of the state, because the state's dead without the individuals that compose it.
Incoming freshmen next year, University of Toronto, Stanford University, 18-year-old kids coming into this. We've been through 3 years of COVID. I won't rehearse it all. Mm-hmm. One sentence. What would you say to them as they begin university at the age of 18 or 19? What's the restorative, the redemptive sentence? What should they do?
Don't be thinking your ambition is corrupt. Because that's part of the message now. Human beings, we're a cancer on the planet. We're headed for an environmental apocalypse. The entire historical structure.
That's why I despise people like Greta Thunberg and Al Gore. We're the cancer. The struggling huddle masses. We're the cancer. We don't own the means of any sort of production, right? For the most part, our carbon footprint is pretty small. I mean, unless you own a really old automobile or something like that. But for the most part, people in the city, our carbon footprint is pretty small, especially those working paycheck to paycheck, which is the vast majority, right? We're not the ones flying up and down airplanes, going vacation everywhere. No, we just go to work and back. Most of us take mass transit. don't own cars, right? So how are we the problem? Anyway, let him continue.
There's nothing but atrocity, et cetera, et cetera. Anyone with any ethical aim whatsoever is just going to pull back. You don't want to manifest any ambition, support the patriarchal structure, exploit the environment. You got to crush yourself down. You shouldn't even have any children. It's like, no. There's no excuse for that. There's zero excuse for that. I saw a professor at an event, something like this. He came out and trumpeted this bloody environmentally friendly house he built, and fair enough, man. It was a pretty interesting house, but not everybody had the $4 million that it took him to build it. And I'm not criticizing his money even. It's like, he's had some money, good for him. He built a house, okay. But then to trumpet that as a moral virtue, well, you're pushing it there. And then he came out to all the kids and he said, my wife and I decided that we were only going to have one child. And I think that's one of the most ethical things we could have possibly done. And I would strongly encourage you to do the same. I thought, you son of a bitch. You get up in front of these young people. A lot of these kids were children of first-generation immigrants from China. And he showed all these images, of these terrible factories in China, these endless rows of sterile mechanism that were subordinating all the Chinese people to this terrible, capitalist machine. And I thought, you don't understand. Half the audience is looking at those factories and thinking, that's a hell of a lot better than struggling through the mud under Mao, buddy. And so I don't know where he thought he was, but to come out in front of all those kids and basically tell them that the whole human enterprise is so goddamn corrupt that the best thing they could possibly do is limit their multiplication, and to think of himself as a scholar and an educator, it was just, I did say something, by the way. It was rather uncomfortable, and he stomped off the stage. But that's no message for young people. There's no excuse for that. And you think, well, we're going to destroy the planet. We have to do this. We have to demoralize the youth to be ethical. It's like, yeah, really, that's your theory? You're going to demoralize young people to be ethical? That's your theory? It's like, you should go home and think about that for like a year. And I'm passionate about this, because you have no idea how many people that's killing. You have no idea. I see people everywhere, all over the world. They're so demoralized, especially young people with a conscience, because they've been told since they were little that there's nothing to them but corruption and power. It's like, how the hell do you expect them to react? Well, I shouldn't do anything then,
Dr. Jordan Peterson on what was the phrase? The divine sovereign
individual.
The divine sovereign individual. Thank you.
And this last point is important as well because, as I said, TikTok is where logic and reason go to die. But I have seen a lot of things on there that are very disturbing. I saw this video of this young lady coming up to this kid, a boy, right? They're probably the same age. She could be older than him. She looked to be slightly taller than him. And she was talking to him and then out of nowhere slapped him and he just, he went off on her. And I'm like, where do people pick these ideologies up from? But you see, it's this whole thing of that women and men are somehow on equal footing. And to a certain extent, women are over men, right? Which is one of the points of modern feminism. The toxic kind, which is what we generally see. So she went up to this guy, and whatever the problem was, she smacked the taste out of his face. He went off on her, dropped her. Didn't look like she could get back up. And I'm like, hey, no comment. That's how I feel about that. You know what I'm saying? All the eco-terrorists out there that point fingers at people, your carbon footprint, all this. Like, man, everybody got to live their own life. That's how it is. If you tell me that you have a job with Greta Thunberg, 6-figure salary, I'm going to fly here, I got to go protest there, we got to go clean this. Send me an application, I will sign up. I will sign up. If you come from, let's say, a wealthy or well-to-do family, you choose that, you choose to go to the forest and be a tree hugger and all this other stuff. Good for you. You don't have no children to worry about. You don't have to worry about working a job to make ends meet. That's fine. Go. I implore you, go. All right, you want to go clean the oceans, the rivers? Go ahead. It cannot be everybody's mantle to pick up. As you heard, it's the divine, sovereign individual. You have to decide what's right for you. You cannot blame other people and say, oh, well, you're not doing your part. No, you do your part. If you feel you are accomplishing what your part is to the best of your ability, that's where you start. And if there are people that want to follow you in that same vein, they do. There'll obviously be others that cannot. You expect the guy that's working a job, let's say he's making 65, 70, even up to 75 grand. He has 2, 3, maybe 4 kids. All right, he's married, has a mortgage, he has a vehicle to pay for. Or probably he doesn't. Let's say he lives in the city, right? Expect this man to leave what he's doing and go protest at a coal mine with you? At what cost? Like, I have never once heard where, we need people for this movement, there's a salary, we have funding, and not once. Can you imagine if there's actually a movement like that where you had to go out there, clean the oceans, rivers? I'm pretty sure there's people that want to do it, but not just because. No, there is a cost of living attached to everything. Anyway, I didn't want to make this video too long. I probably said too much already, but I think the fact that so many people on the left don't like Dr. Peterson is very disturbing to me, because it shows a sort of sociopathic psychology to them. Like, the stuff that he's saying is so basic. I mean, I know he's sort of sometimes speaking in an eloquent way and, uses a certain kind of language, but it's basic stuff that he's saying. It should not be anything so earth-shattering that you can't be like, wow, yeah, I could accept that. That's a fact. You take that, you do with it what you will, and you move on. But this is not what we have. We have a bunch of people on either side that are just, they're so far to their side that rationale has totally been thrown out the window. And I can't abide by that. I can't. There's right, there's wrong, there's can have disagreements on the two, right? Because you might see something as being a little more right than wrong, or a little more wrong than right. You understand what I'm saying? But when it's clear, people lose their lives, and people are claiming 3 genders at the same time. I just saw a TikTok. This girl said she's male, female, and non-binary. And all at the same time. This is not gender fluid. She's all at the same time. What? What? How do you attach a pronoun to that? Anyways, man. Until next time, I'm out. Peace. Rosa! I have literally had to record this video. Rosa! I think this is my 8th time. But this is how dedicated I am to doing and putting this information out. A couple of times my daughter was around. She came in unexpectedly yesterday, and she was upset because I did not let her get on camera. So I'm allowing her to come on camera just to say hi. Say hi. Okay. So until next time, I probably will do another one later on. I'm not sure yet. I have something lined up that I want to talk about, but as you can see, I have company. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to do it or not. But even if I'm not, maybe I'll try to do it tomorrow and post it about the same time. All right. So until next time, I'm out. Peace. Say peace.